There's bhakti yoga, yoga of inner devotion, intensifying your devotion so that through sheer intensity of love you merge into the nature of pure consciousness. That's one path. Then there's karma yoga, and then there's raja yoga, there's jnana yoga, and there's all kinds of yogas. Although we practice a mixture of many different approaches and methods, I want you to know that my main central focus has to do with meditation. In this science of attention, you will need to know what is the difference between this phenomenon you're calling concentration and meditation. I don't really like the word meditation in English because it's not as clarifying for what exactly it is we are talking about. In fact, the English word meditation has very little to do with what we mean by meditation in yoga. If you look in the dictionary at the meaning of meditation, you'll see it means something along these lines: to contemplate or to consider. So when you're sitting and let's say you're contemplating very deeply about a certain subject, whether it's love or truth, the work of philosophers is dealing with a lot of contemplation. And contemplation certainly has its place in the yogic sciences, but technically speaking, it's not what we mean by dhyana. This is the thing you should know about many Eastern languages like Chinese, Japanese, Sanskrit, is that there are very specialized types of words, and these words, when you try to translate them into the English language, there's no exact 100% translation for it. So the only alternative you're left with is you have to estimate. You have to you have to round up and find a meaning which comes as close as possible to the original meaning. And that's why actually, if you don't do a little bit of research into some of the origins of these words that we're using in their original language, you might not have a very crystal clear idea about what these words mean. So the word for meditation in Sanskrit means dhyana. And dhyana refers to a very specialized state of consciousness, a very specialized type of attention. Now you might have heard something like this, which is also slightly misleading but not entirely. You might have heard some people saying that you cannot enter into meditation through effort. Have you heard something like that? Okay. Well, some people say there's no effort involved in meditation. It's just a particular way of being. You can be meditative as a way of being, just like your breath, or just like the blood that's flowing through your body, or the vibrations of your atoms. So you're just spontaneously meditative, but nobody can actually practice meditation. This is, just to be a bit technical, it's not 100% true. Because there's 9 depths of meditation, and the truth is that if you're going to apply your effort, you can only enter into the first depth of meditation, beyond which the remaining 8 are inaccessible as long as you're applying this conscious effort. So before we deal with that meditation, I want to talk about concentration, because understanding concentration is a prelude to understanding meditation. So we'll go step by step, start with the more basic level, and then we move further from there. Now, concentration. How do you define concentration?
Directing my attention.
Through will, through volition, right? So let's say you're watching the breath in your meditation, and the mind is unsturdy, it's ungrounded, it's unstable, it drifts out of the present moment. It could drift to anything, other thought processes, projections about the future, or maybe certain overwhelming feelings subtract from the power of your concentration, and you get preoccupied. But it's basically the same process. The mind drifts out of the present moment, and you become mindful. Note that mindfulness is slightly different from concentration. Mindfulness doesn't demand that you place your attention on any one particular thing. And mindfulness also involves the work of memory. So when you drift out of the present moment and you watch where you have drifted, and then you remember to bring it back to the present moment, or you remember that, I have become forgetful, time to become centered once again. This is the work of mindfulness. Mindfulness sets the tone so that your attention can start to become more free-flowing and one-pointed. But the process is the same. Mind wanders, you notice, you bring it back again, and then you hold it onto the breath. Of course, you don't just hold it in any way whatsoever, because some people, they sit in a monastery or a meditation hall, they turn their attention to the breath, and they keep holding and holding and holding, but nothing is happening. Because it's not enough just to apply effort. You have to apply the right kind of effort, and I will get to that in a moment. It's a very important point, which is why a big part of one part of what Gautama Buddha was teaching was not just effort. He talked about right effort. There's wrong effort and there's right effort. And if you don't know the difference, you could be caught in a vicious cycle, not knowing why I cannot overcome these obstacles, even though you're sincerely trying and your effort is very genuine. So, in concentration, the mind wanders, you bring it back again to the breath. That's the concentration stage. Now, knowing this very well, you have to exclude everything from your field of vision, and like tunnel vision, everything has to become held onto one point. Now, why should somebody practice concentration? Is it just about stillness of the mind? Obviously, that can't be true, because other things can also offer stillness of the mind. If this work that we are embarking on was simply about bringing stillness to the mind, why not just go to sleep? After all, in sleep, there does come stillness of the mind, same kind of process as what may happen in meditation. There's a systematic shutdown of your thought processes and your feelings as you move closer and closer to dreamless sleep. I'm talking the movement to dreamless sleep. Of course, there's dream where the mind is engaged and so is your imagination. But I'm talking about the movement to dreamless sleep. Shutdown of the mind and the senses. What else? The loss of your limited identity. The identity collapses as well. Because most of your identity actually depends on stimulus that you've received from the outside world through the senses. And when the senses lose their support from knowledge from the external world, and if it loses all support, it's like your identity is no more. What you're left with is, you can say memory, but where did you collect your memories? Again, stimulus and information from the outside world. So this is very, very important. The identity is truly something that's external to you, because it depends so much on the external. It doesn't have a genuine fundamental base when it comes to your interiority, the real nature of your inner consciousness. So mind shuts down in dreamless sleep, and there's a loss of your limited identity too. Similar to samadhi. In samadhi, there's also a collapse of your identity. So then why should we apply attention? Why should we practice concentration? After all, these changes also may take place in sleep. It's very, very simple. With concentration, bringing the mind to a stillness is an important part of this process, but you want two things to happen simultaneously. You want the mind to become more and more a vacuum, more and more of an empty space. But at the same time, as the mind becomes more silent, there should come at the same time an expanded, magnified sense of awareness. We talked about this the other day, but I will repeat it just so there's no misunderstandings. Remember something. There is no actual process of the expansion of consciousness. It only appears to be so. Because from first to last, your consciousness, I really describe it like empty space. Think of empty space which is conscious of itself. It's space-like, your consciousness. Because thoughts come and go, everything comes and goes in this vacuum of awareness. Right? So there is no expansion of consciousness. That consciousness, the nature of it, always remains unchanged. What does change is your perception, your perspective. the obstacles in the mind which are clouding the seeing into this nature. And as the obstacles weaken and fall away, because of that you see what's there more clearly. And because of that you have this impression as if there's an expansion of consciousness. But in truth there is no expansion of consciousness. Very important point. So, you want the mind to become quiet, tranquil and calm, but also with a magnified awareness. Why is this so? Gautama Buddha talked about something in his teaching. He talked about samadhi. And the Buddhists have a different meaning for samadhi, by the way. This is why it's important to really look at these terms and know where they come from. In the non-Buddhist schools, samadhi means the non-dual consciousness. When the self and the other fall apart, observer and observed unite as one reality. This is samadhi. The Buddhists have a much more basic meaning. Their meaning for samadhi is simply concentration, not dharana like in the other yogic traditions. So if I sit and I concentrate on a flower, you can say I'm doing samadhi on the flower. Gautama Buddha talked about samadhi, very important point of his teaching, bringing a tranquilization of the mind and the senses. But this wasn't an end in itself, and that's what makes it different from many other traditions. He wants tranquilization of the mind, but for another purpose, so that the mind can be a clear, transparent lens. And then when you look through the lens and start examining and inquiring into the nature of life, in the nature of creation, the nature of the universe and yourself, to see things as they are, you need a mind which is a transparent lens. So that instead of suffering from attachment to your mental projections, you have a mind which can be a reliable mirror. That's the reason. So you want tranquilization and calmness of mind, but for the purpose of insight. Because then when you put the power of your mind to work, it's going to give you valuable knowledge. Whether you turn it inwards or whether you point it outwards. With this kind of mind, you have much valuable knowledge at your disposal, if only you have the clarity to see it. Other Buddhist non-Buddhist schools, they have, in my understanding, it's a very wrong approach. Bring about tranquilization of the mind, so you see the consciousness that's left, and then by remaining in communion with this consciousness, they consider this to be liberation, to be always in a free-flowing way of being of pure consciousness. And yes, that's an important part of it. But as I've told you before, and I'll repeat it because there is a value to repetition, you can be immersed in this pure consciousness, but with still all kinds of misunderstandings and superstitions, and in fact knowledge which you have difficulty letting go of because it's a support for your ego. You can be immersed in pure consciousness and still believe in a God, for example, or heaven and hell, or that, for example, I am this way because of my past karmas and I have to live out my karmas. I'm not the creator of my destiny. My karmas dictate. And in other words, you cannot have the right discrimination between right and wrong knowledge. Get my meaning? And you're still merged in this pure consciousness. And the evidence of this is that some sages, they became even identified with their own consciousness, and they said that this consciousness pervades the whole universe. I don't see how anybody can make this statement confidently as if it's a fact. There's no evidence of it when you look inwards. You might find within yourself pure consciousness, but how can you take this extra step and say this consciousness is eternal? It might be profound, it might be vast, but there's a difference between something which is immense and something which is eternal. The speed of light is immense. Nobody can truly conceive what's the speed of light. But it's still finite. It travels at a finite speed. And we don't have external evidence to support that this consciousness is all-pervading either. Certainly not in modern science. So my point here is that you want your concentration to bring tranquilization of the mind, so then you can move to the next step, which is insight into your internal workings. When I say insight into your internal workings, you will need a different method than one-pointed concentration. The Buddhists refer to this as vipassana, which actually means to see. It's also been referred to as insight meditation. What can vipassana offer me that one-pointed concentration cannot? It's like this. If you want to understand the behavior of an animal, a wild animal, it's best that you observe it in its natural environment with as little interference as possible. You don't try to tie it down or control it, or at least not control it so that it's functioning artificially. Like a computer too. If I want to know the workings of a computer, the full workings of a computer, I should not shut it down and pull out the electrical switch. Rather, I let the mechanism flow and then see how all the parts are working together. And then I'll see that a computer actually depends on so many parts. It's not, there's no part of the computer which is truly independent. And the same thing is true when you look at the nature of your inner experience. In other words, there is no independence at all. When something happens, it's because something else has happened. When something falls away, it's because something else has fallen away. Everything, in other words, is so finely interconnected. How will you know the interconnectedness of your own immediate experience? Whether you're going about in daily life, or whether you're sitting in the lotus posture, closing your eyes and turning your attention inwards. How will you know the full machinery of your own mind? Unless you learn to observe all the parts. And then you'll find that this impression that you call a self, that I'm this localized being that's sitting in here, is just imaginary. It's a combination of many things that work together to give birth to the sense of self. But actually if you take away all those parts and you look and see what's left, there's no self at all. That's the teaching of Anatman, no self. So you want concentration to become a tool for your insight. And same thing with meditation even, because meditation is just an expansion from concentration. As the concentration goes deeper and deeper, eventually you'll reach a very specialized state of mind where instead of the mind wandering and you continuously bringing it back again and again, there will be an uninterrupted movement of continuous attention. But there's still you and the breath, or you and that object. As it goes deeper, the mind even becomes more and more silent and calm. And then, from meditation, the next quantum leap would be the movement into samadhi. So in samadhi, even the distinction between the observer and the observed fall apart. So there's no ego that's looking through the lens of your mind and body. Rather, there's just an indescribable seeing that's fresh, free of egotism. There's only the seeing. There's not a seer that's doing the seeing. There's only the very process of seeing. So, you want to develop your concentration for many reasons. This is the main theme we're talking about today, is concentration. 1, tranquilization of the mind. which means it's very important to learn how to relax. But to relax as an expression of wakefulness, not just merely relaxed. You want to be relaxed, one part of you has to be passive. So relaxed, feminine, letting go. But another part of you has to be burning with attention. Something's active, something's passive. If you have either one to the extreme, it's going to be a problem. Some people, they sit in an upright posture and they keep the upright posture, and then they fall asleep and they think this is meditation. This is just falling asleep in an upright posture. Why does this happen? Too much relaxation. If you have relaxation to the extreme, you fall asleep. If you have tension of the mind, too much energy in your concentration even, and that's to an extreme, your mind will be overexcited. A middle path is needed. Some relaxation in the right proportion. Some wakefulness in the right proportion. A fusion of those two things, and this quality of meditation blossoms. So you do want this relaxation. But remember, ultimately, as far as where the path is leading, the relaxation will help you with the power of insight. This is the secret of observation, that within observation lies your capacity for insight. And without transformative insight, yes, you can go through many different states of consciousness. There's really a vast oceanic terrain that exists in this body, which can be fascinating at times. You may discover things in you which you never even imagined could be possible, because you're carrying inside your mind and body the wealth of the whole creation. But it's all gymnastics gymnastics in altered states of consciousness, if it doesn't bring transformative insight. An insight which helps you to learn a more integrated way of being in the world. And of course, morality also has something to do with this as well. Because as your self-knowledge deepens, your feeling of connection to the whole also deepens. And you're bound to stumble upon a compassionate quality of mind. Once this compassionate quality enters into your life and becomes more integrated, then you'll be not just concerned with, okay, how's my body doing or how's my mind doing, but you'll also be concerned about the welfare of others in general. And I don't see how it's even possible to live a moral life without self-knowledge. There's an artificial kind of morality which unfortunately is passing off as morality, just following doctrines, and sometimes following those doctrines because of the fear that you're going to be punished by a God, the punishment of eternal hell, so the fear of hell and the greed for the euphoria of heaven. And what's the strength in this? This is cowardice. It's not the strength of the morality that I'm talking about. This is a morality that exclusively comes from within. And you can say, it's all relative, what's good and bad. So many different cultures have different conceptions of what's good and bad. That's completely separate. There are objective moral qualities that start to become alive in you. For instance, how will it be possible for you to do violence to somebody else with a malicious intent through a mind of non-attachment? How would it be possible? It just doesn't go with the territory. When you see, imagine as an immediate way of life that your own Buddha nature is the same Buddha nature that flows through everything, even a small ant that's crawling, then to do violence to another is not any different than violence towards myself. And violence towards myself, I might be very peaceful and at ease with everybody in the world, but I'm doing violence to myself, this is still violence. And this is still immoral. Like Jainism, there are some Jains for whom the most holiest way to leave this world is by fasting themselves to the death. And yet, on the other hand, a very essential part of their teaching is ahimsa, non-violence. So this is a very subtle kind of violence. I mean, the Jains will be so careful not even to swallow an insect or a microorganism. That's how much they put emphasis on non-violence. If you have an extremist Jain, one thing you can be certain of is he's not going to be a nuisance to anybody. But he might be a nuisance to himself without knowing. I mean, fasting to the death, depriving your body of nutrients, a body which cannot defend itself. Your brain becomes malnutritioned, damage to your own intelligence. That's a very distorted. If there's any concept of morality that involves this, it has to be very distorted type of morality, if you ask me. So all of these things are tied in together. I mean, I know they sound so different from one another. Concentration, insight, morality, self-knowledge. But hopefully in time you'll see how all these things are interconnected. That actually by developing the power of your attention, this can actually guide you to a more moral way of life. This might not seem obvious in the beginning. So there's so much potential in even a single moment of genuine awareness of the present moment. If you just cultivate that one quality, then you have the power to let your mind unleash its full potential, but as a conscious process. So this is why you want to develop concentration. There's many benefits attached to it. Another benefit of concentration, if the concentration becomes one-pointed enough, because of the tranquilization of the mind, non-attachment. And if this becomes habitual, then you have equanimity, the ability to remain centered and balanced in spite of pleasant or unpleasant experience. This, you don't need philosophy for this or to read pages and pages of sutras. Just develop this one factor of concentration. But in the right way. It will eventually lead you there. You see? So, don't underestimate the power of observation. That's all I want you to remember for today.